Hi everyone, I'm Virginia Vasilati. I work for the Partnership for the Delaware Estuary. We're a regional environmental nonprofit and we work in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. And I specifically work in the Schuylkill River watershed where we are today, working with a number of different partners, all to protect water quality that's going into the Schuylkill River. And ultimately that's for the purpose of clean drinking water, which we all rely on for our everyday lives. And just some background about me. So I grew up in Rockville, Maryland, which is outside of DC. I went to the University of Delaware and graduated with a Bachelor's of Science in Environmental Science, if anyone's interested in pursuing a career path down that avenue. And then after that, I actually worked back in Rockville, Maryland at Montgomery County's Department of Environmental Protection, and that was a regulatory agency, county-based agency, again, focused on protecting water. And then after 1 year working there, I moved up to Wilmington, Delaware, worked at the Partnership for the Delaware Estuary now for 5 years, where I am today as the Schuylkill Action Network Coordinator. So that's just a little bit about my background and how I got into the career where I am today. And then I'll let Erica introduce herself.
Okay, good morning guys. My name is Erica and I also work at the Partnership for the Delaware Estuary. And I started working with the Schuylkill Action Network last year. I also went to the University of Delaware, graduated 2 years ago. And now I'm here. I've been working in clean water and doing education for the past 2 years. So today we're going to talk to you guys about clean water. Like we said, we focus in the Schuylkill River watershed. So where we are right now is draining to the Schuylkill River, which ends up in Philadelphia. And we're going to talk about watersheds, pollution, and what we all can do to help keep our water clean. So here's some more background just about the Schuylkill Action Network, showing what we do to help clean water. So we have seven different kind of groups that we focus on. And I'll just go through really quickly. So abandoned, does this have like a pointer?
Yeah, that first one should be pointed.
There we go. So abandoned mine drainage. This is like a little bit farther out in Schuylkill County, but there's old coal mines that kind of bubble up. And so that is putting some metals out into the water. So we work with them up there to try and fix that problem. Another group we have is agriculture. So this is where we work with farmers to kind of plant trees and fencing for cattle on their properties so that if they have water near their farms, it's going to help keep the water clean. We also do education and outreach. So like today, we're coming and teaching you guys and the public about clean water. Pathogens and point source. That's kind of a confusing one, but basically it's working with water utilities. So people that clean your water, the people that provide water to your taps in your houses. Stormwater. This is working with cities to help put in rain gardens and other native plants to help stop flooding. Recreation. So the big thing that we do there is called the Schuylkill Sojourn. Has anybody heard of that? So basically that's when we, I think we had 200 people, right? So 200 people this year paddled all the way down the Schuylkill River for a week. So we're just trying to connect people to the rivers. And the last one is watershed land protection. So we want to protect our land, right? We don't want people to build on it if we can protect our forest, and that will help keep the water clean. So before we kind of start talking about all these different topics, I want to ask you guys what ways that you use water every day. Just raise your hand. Yeah. consume it, right? So drinking. What else? What was that?
We use it to bathe.
To bathe, right? So showering. What else? How to use water every day. What did you do this morning? Clean the dishes. It's a good one. Yeah.
Brush your teeth.
Brush your teeth. Think of anything else? Yeah. A pool. Yeah, that's a good one, right? So for fun things too. How about plants and animals? What ways do they need water? Yeah. Right, food and to drink. What else? That's what you were going to say? Okay. Yeah, you have another one? Right, animals need water. Right, so plants and trees need to grow. Can anybody think of anything else? Okay, I think you guys got most of it. So, right, plants need it to grow. So, if we have crops, they need water. Animals need it to survive. We need it to drink, to do our dishes. How about to do our laundry too, right? We said showering. That's for cooking. And then there's lots of fun things. And what's the last one there? Yeah, right here. Yeah.
Flushing the toilet.
Right, getting rid of waste, right? So we can't really survive without doing all these things, right? If we didn't have food or water, and if we couldn't keep clean, then we wouldn't be able to survive, right? So it's very important that we have clean water. Okay, so has anybody heard of the word watershed? Okay, so maybe half of you. Somebody want to give me a definition? Yeah?
A place where water collects.
Place where water collects. That's pretty good. Anybody want to add on to that? Okay, so it is kind of like a place where water collects, right? It is an area of land, and all of the water in that area of land is draining to the same spot. So if you hold out your hand like this, we're going to say that our fingers are like little streams, and those little streams are flowing into a bigger river or a lake, right? And then eventually, where does all the water end up? Right, in the ocean. So no matter where you are on the land, you're always going to be in a watershed. So it's not just the water, it's also the land. And when it rains, like you said, all the water is collecting and eventually flowing to the same spot. Okay, so here's a map of all of the big watersheds in the United States. Does anybody know what the pink one is? The big giant pink one? What river system is that? Yeah. Yeah, it's in Mississippi. How about the yellow one, the big yellow one on the left here? Yeah, somebody said it. It's Colorado.
I did something.
Does any, well, it's kind of hard to see, but does anybody want to guess where we are, what color watershed on this map? Want to guess? Not the pink one. Yeah? The green one at the top? Nope, a little bit farther to the right, to the east. Yeah. Yes. So we are this tiny little yellow one right here. So let's zoom into that. That's where we are. Zoom in a little more. So that's that area zoomed in. So this is what river system? Does anyone know? Yeah, can you guess? Delaware? Yeah, the Delaware. So this is the Delaware River watershed. And we are right here. So let's break it down a little more. So So the Delaware River watershed can be broken up into smaller rivers, smaller watersheds. Does anybody want to guess where we are here? And you can't read it, but just give me a color. Yeah. Yep, the dark blue one. So that is the Schuylkill River watershed. So all of the water here is draining down into the Delaware, and then it's going into the Delaware Bay to what ocean? Atlantic Ocean, right. And we can keep going. So if we keep going, we see that we are close to Tulpahawken Creek. So this is the Tulpahawken Creek. It's going into Blue Marsh Lake. Has anyone heard of Blue Marsh Lake? Yeah. So that's right here. And then it's going to the Schuylkill, down to the Delaware. See that? And we can zoom in even more. There's a very, very tiny creek behind the school called Furnace Creek. So, here's how our water in this area is moving. We start out at Furnace Creek, then we go to Tulpahawken, and then the Schuylkill River, and then the Delaware River, and then the Delaware Bay, and then the Atlantic Ocean, right? So, if we go back, and remember that whatever happens on the land is going to be draining into the water. All of the things that we're doing on the land around us can affect not only us, but everybody downstream, right? Does that make sense? Yeah.
So let me ask this question real quickly. Do you guys, anybody vacation down in Delaware by Rehoboth or Lewis or any of those? You go out on the Delaware Bay fishing and crabbing and clamming. So basically what you do today here at Conrad Weiser, if you were to dump water or if you were to pollute, a month from now, 2 months from now, 3 months from now, that pollutant would be in the Delaware Bay potentially where you would be vacationing. So think about that drive, 3.5 hours from here to get down there. What you do here today could impact that distance that far away. It's really crazy to think about, but it's really important to understand then what they're trying to get at, that land use up here can influence downstream.
Exactly. So you might not think that it's important to clean up, right? Because we all know our oceans are full of plastic, right? So you might not think that your trash could end up there, but it actually can, right? It can flow there through all of these different streams off of the land. So this is why watersheds are so important, right? If we have to do all of these things that we talked about before, then we need to keep all of the land and all of the water clean, right? But I have a couple pieces of bad news, of challenges to keeping the water clean. So, only 1% of all the water on Earth is fresh water, right? So 70% of our Earth is oceans, right? So that means that most of the water on Earth is not fresh, it's what? Salt, right? So we can't use that to drink, right? So of all of that ocean water, so 97% is salt, and that only leaves 3% of all the water on Earth as fresh water. But 2% of that is locked away in our glaciers, right, in the ice caps. So we can't really use that either. So we only have 1% that we can use. The second piece of bad news is pollution, right? Can someone give me a definition of pollution? Yeah, in the back.
Basically putting chemicals into the water, like oil, maybe even plastic, that like
Right.
turns the water bad.
Exactly. Do you want to add on?
Plastic straws to hurt sea turtles.
Yes, plastic straws do hurt sea turtles, right? So pollution is anything bad that's not supposed to be in the water that we are putting in the water. And when we talk about pollution, we separate it into two different types. The first type is called point source pollution. Can you guys say point source pollution? Point source pollution. So what do you think point source pollution would be? Yeah. So it's coming from a pipe, right? So it's something that you can point to. If there's like a factory and it's got a pipe going back out into the water, you can point to that and say, okay, that pipe leads back to that factory, so that's exactly where that pollution is coming from. But most of our pollution is called non-point source pollution. So what do you think that would be? Yeah.
Fresh water?
So it's not clean, right? Because it's a type of pollution. But where is it coming from?
Farms?
Right, farms is an example. So it's coming from all over the land. It might not necessarily be coming from a pipe. You might not see it getting into the stream, but it's coming from sources on the land. And when it rains, those pollutions, that pollution is running off into the stream. So it's kind of hard to tell where it came from, right? If you have a piece of litter that's in a stream, you don't know who put it there. Maybe it blew there, maybe someone threw it there, maybe it washed away in the rain. So it's hard to tell exactly where it's coming from. So non-point source pollution is kind of like land pollution. Okay, and I'm going to kind of explain that better using our EnviroScape in a few minutes. But I also want to talk about another challenge to getting clean water is that we are developing the land, right? So ideally we would like to have our land be full of forests and meadows and wetlands, things with natural plants that keep a natural water cycle and that help filter out pollutants, right? Because plants help stabilize the soil and filter pollutants. But we have a lot of cities and parking lots and roads and houses and buildings and farms, and we need these things to survive, but they are creating hard surfaces where the water can't filter through and can't be cleaned by plants. And instead, it's really polluted and flowing right back into our streams. So I think this is a video. I mean,
You might have to press it there.
Okay, so here's an example of runoff carrying pollution into a storm drain when it rains. You guys see like the litter there? And then anything else that's on that road or in the grass is also going to be flowing into the stream, right? Okay, so if you guys want to come gather around. So this is called EnviroScape, and basically what it is a model of a watershed. So what kinds of things do we have in our watershed? Water, right? So this is going to be our ocean for today, and we've got this bay here, and then a river and some smaller streams up here, right? What else do we have in our watershed? Land, right? What's on the land?
Roads.
Roads, what else? Farms, beaches, right?
Tree. Grass.
Grass, yeah. Maybe forests. Here's our very, very small forest.
Boat docks.
Right, boat docks too. So all of this is in our watershed, and it's not always going to be a perfect square, right? It's going to follow the topography. It's going to follow like the mountains and the landscape. But this is just our model. So I'm not sure what this is supposed to be, but that's just a big industrial building. Here's our farm. We've got our barn and our farmhouse. Tractor. So this is actually, I think, No, this is it. This is a sewage treatment plant. So you guys see this hole here? So that's where they would treat all of the sewage that's coming in. And then eventually it would go back into the water once it's clean. We've got an apartment building. We've got some houses here. What do you guys think this might be? Factory, right? So this is our point source pollution here, right? This pipe that's going right back into the water. Did I get everything? This. I think this is just a house. So we'll put this house. And then, of course, you have cars driving on our roads, right? Okay, so let's go through each part of our watershed and think about what types of pollution there would be. So we'll start, we said our factory, that's going to be our point source pollution, right? So here, coming out of this pipe, we've got our point source pollution. And this could be a lot of different things, right? It could be chemicals, it could be like metals. So we'll just show some point source pollution near our factory. It's not working very well. Okay, how about farms? What kinds of pollution would you find on a farm? Yeah.
Feces?
Right, animal waste, feces, right? So if this farmer's got some cows in his field, there's going to be lots of fertilizer and animal waste there, right? What else? What else would you find on a farm?
We have one down here. You also find
Pesticides.
Pesticides, awesome, yeah. So to kill any pests, if they have crops, they're gonna spread pesticides on the fields, and that is usually some sort of chemical. So this guy just spread pesticide all over his field. Okay, so let's move on to our cars. What kind of pollution might come from our cars? Yeah. Exhaust, right? So that's air pollution, right? Carbon dioxide getting into the air. What about pollution you would find on the land from a car? Oil, right? If you have an oil leak. So this guy's got an oil leak, right? And he's driving all around the neighborhood. How about in our communities near our houses and near our apartment buildings? Yeah.
Maybe it might use. I was gonna think of like the house using like water to drink, but wait, it using for like showering and bathing.
Yep, so that's where a lot of like water use is gonna be, right? So that's why you wanna conserve water. But outside on the land, like in our yards and in the mowed areas, what kind of pollution might you find? Yeah.
Things like candy wrappers and stuff.
Right, litter. So maybe if it's trash day or something, somebody doesn't have a lid on it, or it's a windy day, there might be some litter blowing around on the street. Somebody's maybe throwing litter out their car window. Has anybody seen someone doing that? Yeah. I always beep at them. What else might be in our yards?
Well, I mean, I guess on the streets, if you have like live in a bad neighborhood, I guess you could like find spilled drugs, like heroin just going into the water.
Hopefully not, yeah, but if it's a really bad neighborhood, there might be like pharmaceuticals too, right? If you have things that you find at the pharmacy that you just flush down the toilet, that's gonna get into the water, right? So we could say there's some chemicals. How about, does anybody have a pet? Anybody have a dog? Right? What might you find in your yard if you have a dog?
If they poop or if you have any other outside pets.
Right. So pet waste, right? So let's pretend this person here, or this apartment building, there's probably a lot of dogs in there, and they're not very good about cleaning up after them. So that's all gonna be on the land. Does anybody's parents use maybe fertilizer or pesticide in your yards? No? Okay, that's good. Well, this guy is not very good about keeping the environment clean, and he does. He uses a lot of fertilizer and pesticide on his grass. So we're going to draw that. Maybe they use fertilizer to keep their grass green, right?
How's fertilizer bad?
That's a good question, okay? So fertilizer has nutrients in it, right? That's what helps plants grow. But if there's too much of it that gets in the water, have you guys ever seen like a green pond or like a green lake? Looks kind of gross, right? So all those nutrients are really yummy for algae. So that's what makes them green, right? So when there's too many nutrients in the water, the algae grows and then all the fish die and we can't drink it, right? Because there's like bacteria in it too. So that's why fertilizer is bad if there's too much of it. Okay, did I miss anything? Anybody think of anything else? Yeah.
Like when you have heat and it comes out. Like I have a pipe in my house and I see.
Oh, it's
smoke
like
coming
car, yeah. So that's more like air pollution, right? But maybe some of it can kind of consolidate. How about this sewage treatment plant? What if it rains a lot and this overflows? What's gonna happen? Right, there's gonna be sewage. So hopefully this never happens, right? Because our treatment plants are pretty good. But sometimes if it rains too much, it does overflow, right? And the last one I'm gonna talk about is this bare patch of soil. So it might be kind of weird to think about soil as a pollutant, but if you don't have any grass or trees here, what do you think is going to happen?
It flies around.
The soil is gonna grow.
Right, the soil is just going to like fly around. When it rains, it's going to wash away, be really muddy, and if it gets into the streams, the fish and the other aquatic animals there can't live very well. So this is actually going to be another type of pollutant, is this sediment here.
So how many of you, I just have questions, we had a really heavy rain on Sunday night. Anybody remember hearing that? Yeah. Okay, how many of you, when you drove here on Monday, had a glance at some of the streams? Maybe you drove by a stream, did you notice what color the water was? Didn't look like what? Didn't look like water. What did it look like? Looked like chocolate milk. That is really one of the biggest problems that we have around here when we have big rain events like that. The water rises so fast, and we have so many areas that are not covered. They might be dirt covered, but they are also covered, just like our parking lot here, and the stuff just washes right over it and carries it all in the stream. So it's a big problem that we have. So, yeah, that's a big. And another thing, somebody did say something about the heat, and that's another issue. You can't really show that on here, but when you have a big rain event on, like let's say all of a sudden it just started to rain outside. It's really sunny. But if you would go outside right now and put your hand down on the blacktop where we park our cars, what kind of temperature do you think it would be there? Hot. Okay, so you get a really, we have those pop-up thunderstorms. Water that runs off of a parking lot or any kind of area that's not covered by vegetation is going to be warm. So how do you think that's going to affect your aquatic life in the stream? What do you think it's going to do to them? Potential to do? Yeah, it can. We've had some fish killed by that happening. I really can't show that on here, but I maybe shouldn't have brought that up, but it's important. We sometimes don't think about that. Yeah.
Yeah, so they like it when it's cold water, right? So when it gets too hot, so we can kind of show that. We'll just kind of say that we had some temperatures that are too hot in the water, right? So thermal pollution can be a type of pollution. And then I'm also just gonna draw some here on our beaches, right? We could have you guys ever seen like litter on the beach and stuff, right? This is all just loose sand that can wash away into the bay. Okay? So right now we've got all this pollution and it's just hanging out on the land, right? We probably don't see that it's there unless it's litter, because you can't really see a lot of fertilizers and pesticides and oil and stuff. But we're gonna see what happens to our clean water here when we have a rainstorm, right? So there goes our oil. Here's our animal waste. Here's our fertilizers and our pesticides from the farm. Sorry if you get sprayed. Pollution from our beaches, right? Here's our point source pollution going right into the water, right into the ocean. Okay, so what happened? Can you guys all see in the ocean right now? Try to lift it up a little bit. So we still got some pollution on the land, right? It didn't all wash away. But you can see that everything that was on the land here, all the different colors, so you got blue, you got brown, you got orange, you got pink, you got green, they're all now in our water system, right? So all those pollutants that were on the land, this farmer might not think that whatever's up here is going to end up all the way down here, but it did, right? So this is showing all different types of pollutants in our watershed and how a watershed works, right? Draining to the same point. Maybe our giant fish are now dead, right? So that's why we want to keep everything on the land clean. We want to fix things on the land to help the water, right? Anybody have questions about this? Nope, you good? What about to slow down runoff? How can we slow that down? Yeah.
Could you like create more strict punishments for like factories that pour chemicals into the water?
So that could work, right? So we do have a lot of regulations that help make sure that factories don't pollute too much. What else?
People can make like dams and they could like filter it while they're
So we don't actually want to make dams because that harms the fish, but the water is cleaned by the treatment plants, right? So maybe if we update them, that could help filter the water more. But how about like our fresh water, right? How about our rivers? What should we tell our farmers and our parents to do in the yards and in the fields? Yeah.
To reduce using fertilizer and pesticides.
Right, reduce using fertilizer and pesticides. We'll go through these. So obviously don't litter. I'm sure none of you do that, hopefully. Pick up after your pets. How about this one? Recycling, right? So always think about reducing, reusing, recycling so that it doesn't end up in the water. If you go shopping, if you're cleaning, you want to always try to buy eco-friendly products so we don't have all these different chemicals entering the water. What else?
If you know that there's like a company that's like putting chemicals in the water, you could like boycott them, I guess.
Yeah, so we always want to be sustainable, right? If you know that a company is doing bad things, maybe you'll stop shopping there and stop going there and using their stuff, right? How about this one? What's this kid doing? Yeah. Right, planting. So he's planting a little tree. So if we have more areas that are full of forests and native plants, that's going to help slow down the water and filter out the pollutants. And we always want to be conserving water, right? So I'm sure you guys know if you're brushing your teeth, you want to turn off the tap. If you're taking a shower, you want to try to not make it too long. So this is one of our storm drain markers. So this is what we put on our storm drains to educate people that whatever's running off into the storm drain is going right back into the stream. So this is an example of how we can educate people and do outreach to let them know that we need to keep the land clean, right? How about eating vegetarian? Why do you guys think that might help with water conservation? Any ideas? So what do you think takes more water to grow? A full-size cow or a piece of corn? Right, the cow, right? The cow needs 10 times more water than a plant does from the time it is born until the time that you eat it, right? So if you have a vegetarian meal versus one with meat in it, it's actually saving 10 times the amount of water. So that's one thing you can try to think about. And I'm sure all of you are very active young people, but we just want to always be thinking about volunteering. Does anybody do any sort of volunteering? Yeah? What kind of stuff do you guys do?
Volunteer at a local horse rescue.
Cool, yeah.
With dolls doing
Awesome. What else?
I can see you were like pack fishing, mac and cheese for like people that need it.
Okay, so helping with food security, right? And there's other ways you can volunteer for water too. So if you know of any like gardening or cleanups, we do a lot of like trash cleanups. That's one thing you can do to help water, right? Okay, so we're going to do a couple of things today to learn about helping the environment. So unfortunately, our storm drain markers did not ship to us in time, so we can't do that today. But we will be learning about green infrastructure. Does anybody know what green infrastructure is? Has anyone heard of rain gardens? No? Yeah, a little bit?
Yeah.
So green infrastructure is things that help the water filter after a storm, right? So there's things like basins. Have you guys ever seen like a little dip in the ground, right, that collects water? Yeah. Outside, I think you guys have a rain garden, right?
Well, there's a basin right there.
Oh, there's a basin right here, and there's a bunch of native plants here. So a rain garden is like a little garden with a lot of native plants that help soak up the water. So we're going to learn all about different types of green infrastructure, and I think Virginia will tell you guys more about that.
All right, guys, so like Erica said, we're going to talk about green infrastructure, and it's called green infrastructure because we're using green plants, trees, shrubs as types of infrastructure to absorb, filter, and clean the water. So again, just looking at site context here, what we're going to do today is we are going to do some campus visioning. So we are going to break up into groups of five different groups. I think there's about 30 people here total. So it should be about 5 to 6 people per group. So once we break up into groups, what we'll be doing is we'll be looking at a large map of the entire school campus, so both the high school and middle school. And we'll be doing some campus visioning ideas, so figuring out where we can put in green infrastructure practices to help clean up the water. And I'll walk through a couple different examples so we're all familiar with what green infrastructure is, what these types of practices are, and where they would be most beneficial here on Conrad Weiser. And then also we do have these green guides which show more in detail about green infrastructure practices. So if you have specific questions, each person should be able to take one of these home and read more about green infrastructure. So again, Erica touched on this. Conrad Weiser here is located in the Furnace Creek watershed. So let's see if I can make this work. So here's the school campus, both high school and middle school. And the way that the water flow is flowing is it's going down into Furnace Creek here. So we're kind of uphill here and all the water is running off into Furnace Creek. And so when we think about campus visioning ideas, a rain garden is a great example of something that can be done in a smaller area to help collect water. The water collects in this depression here. There are native plants that help filter and absorb water so that water is contained on the site and is able to go back into the groundwater clean instead of running off with all the different types of pollutants that Erica talked about. So, let's see, up here, does anyone know what these are? See these containers here? I think you guys actually have one of those on your campus, don't you? Yeah, you too. Do you know?
They collect rainwater.
Yes. Do you know what those are called? Something really simple. Rain barrel. So if they're smaller, they're usually called a rain barrel. If they're something larger like this, they're called a cistern. It's just the amount of water that it can contain. So this is really great for when there's not a lot of land area to collect the water, and water is running off of the roof into these gutters that then collects into the rain barrels or cisterns. And so this water can be used to water plants and gardens, and it also is just a good way of slowing down the water. What about over here? You guys know what that is? Up on this roof. It says it right above too. All the way in the back? All the way in the back?
Green room.
Green roof, great. And I believe you guys have one too on the barn right there. So that's awesome. You guys are already doing a lot of great work to protect water. Down here, so this is kind of hard to see in this picture, but basically it's pavement that has pores in it. So the water can actually filter through the pavement instead of just running straight off. So porous pavement, again, what we call something that's able to filter the water through. So this is a great alternative to typical asphalt or cement that we see on our parking lots and sidewalks. Over here, it's parking lot enhancements. So in the middle of some of the spots, we see there's kind of this trench or depression here. So water is running off of the parking lot, both sides, and being absorbed here in this little trench area with trees and plants. So more green infrastructure or stormwater management features. So over here, this is naturalized basin. So that basin that you guys have over there, that huge depression that you see, that one over there I believe is mostly mowed, but there's opportunity to plant native plants, shrubs and trees in these basins. So it's not only slowing down the water that's going into the basin, but it's also helping to filter it and clean it. Over here, you obviously can't see it because it's underground, but specifically in large cities like down in Philadelphia, they do a lot of underground storage. So there's actually large tanks under parking lots, playground, buildings where they hold the water until it can slowly be sent to a water treatment plant, so a wastewater treatment plant that can filter it. Permeable playground surfaces. So again, when we're talking about porous surfaces, on playgrounds, there's different materials. Maybe it's stepping stones here that have areas where the water can then be absorbed around it. That's a great alternative than to just having the whole area paved. And what we have here, this step pool, this is if there's an area where a lot of water is running off, we can try and slow it down by having these different step pools. And now just moving on to like also considering schoolyard enhancements when we're doing this campus visioning activity. So maybe we want to have some natural areas for play or for outdoor classrooms. So you see here the slides just mixed in with some of the rocks and plants around it. These are painted rain barrels. This is a great way to engage students and have some of these green infrastructure practices be tied into artwork and be exciting for you guys as well. Again, just showing some of the different enhancements we can do. Here are some of those rain barrels or cisterns we were talking about, and you can see the gardens next to it. So these are vegetable gardens that are being watered by the rain barrels. And again, here just showing different gardens that can help slow down and filter water. And then moving on here, so this is just some natural area, you know, using wooden benches as an outdoor classroom for students to learn about what's going on in the environment. So this native garden here that you have outside is a great opportunity for you guys to learn about bees and other native pollinators that are in this area. Again, nature discovery is kind of along those lines. If there's ways that we can make access to the creek back there for you guys to play in it and learn, that's another idea that we can potentially work into this campus visioning activity. All right, so now, I guess first, does anyone have any questions about some of these green infrastructure practices that I talked about?